Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Kyle Kerwins, co-founder and CEO at Bigeye, and I'm here with Eric Sale, who's a senior staff software engineer here at Bigeye, as well as Zach Behrman, director of partnerships. And also, before we get going, happy birthday, Zach.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for spending your birthday with us and everybody who's watching. So we recently were at both the Snowflake Summit and the Databricks Data and AI Summits the last couple of weeks in San Francisco. And today we're going to be talking through a recap. So Eric attended a lot of the sessions at Snowflake. Zach attended a bunch of the sessions at Databricks. So I have a bunch of questions for them about some of the content that they saw. So before we get into the first section, which will be Snowflake with Eric, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us today. And if we could advance to the Snowflake slide, we did send quite a big contingent. I think it was a pretty large event. I want to say it was 7,000 people this year in the Moscone Center in San Francisco. So if you came by the booth and saw us there, thanks for saying hello. Hopefully you saw some of our smiling faces there in the photo on the right. And I think we met, what did we meet? I think we met almost 1,000 people during the conference, which was quite a lot. So that was a super cool experience. Always love being back in the Bay Area, which is Eric, that's your home. So it's nice to be back there and had a great time at Snowflake. I spent a lot of my time at the booth, but if we hop to the next slide, it'd be great to start hearing about some of the sessions that you went to, Eric.
Sure. Yeah, one of the larger announcements they had at the keynote as well is the integration with their creation of the new Polaris catalog, which is an integration with Iceberg. So basically a way to access Iceberg data directly through Snowflake, as well as through, as it shows in the slide, various other technologies. With the intent to open source the Polaris catalog, they said within 90 days of the conference itself. So very interesting to see sort of like the idea of this ability to open source the storage formats and still access everything through Snowflake.
And Eric, you've worked on storage formats on top of Parquet in the past. I know that from having worked with you in a previous life. For anybody who's watching who is not super familiar with Parquet or Iceberg or this general architecture where your compute separated from the storage like that, do you want to maybe give us like a quick background around what Iceberg is and why this is important?
Sure. I mean, basically, it is a way to efficiently store and access the data. It allows, again, as the slide shows, right? If you're separating the compute and the storage, you're able to access it through various different systems, provide different sort of performance attributes, different options such as potentially ability for historical lookbacks and things along those lines that you can efficiently expose to various different query engines. For ease of use, ease of compute, ease of update, that sort of idea. And then because it is again not tied in with a single vendor, the goal would be I can write it with Spark, I can read it with Snowflake, I can suddenly add to it with Trino. The interoperability with the different compute engines is a major win.
Yeah, so you could dump all your data into storage in Iceberg format, and then you can run one or more of these compute engines on top of it simultaneously as well, right?
Correct, yeah.
And they're calling Polaris a catalog. When I first heard this announcement, I think somebody came by the booth and they were like, "Hey, did you hear that Snowflake announced a data catalog? What do you think about that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't anticipate that." And then I later learned that the use of the word catalog here is a bit interesting. Maybe you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a catalog closer to something like a Unity catalog for Databricks. It's really about identifying where the tables are, what their structure is, so that we can be accessed with the query engine. Less about actually the rest of the features of governance and ownership and those ideas.
So not like an Elation or a Calibra or something like that.
Correct.
Do you have any other takeaways about Polaris? I know that we are going to talk about some governance features a little bit later. Anything else you gleaned about Polaris that folks should know about?
Not really for Polaris itself, no.
And so we'll be watching. We'll see when this gets actually open sourced. I think they have a GitHub page up for it, but it's not actually available yet. But they said within the next quarter or so. So folks can pay attention there if they want to go and use Polaris open source. Cool. All right. I think the next topic is, about Cortex. And I think we got a couple of topics today about AI. That was a pretty AI-filled set of announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, AI was very much the focus of the summit, and how to make it easier to use and that idea. So Cortex is a suite of services that they provided. They actually did a demo live where they brought up a random audience member and had them write a chatbot through Snowflake services. It went about as well as live demos ever go, which is not bad given that they pulled up a random audience member. So basically the idea is to Snowflake is trying to keep the compute of all of this LLM generation of doing your training and modeling close. So they make it very easy through a few Snowflake commands to run a lot of AI and ML operations inside the same Snowflake interface with the same access controls, that sort of thing. With a very few SQL commands, you can build chatbot, build a RAG thing on top of your existing semi-structured data to be able to pull stuff out, actually provide examples. That's what they did in the demo, as well as a number of other ML and AI functionality. There was also a few talks that I went to around the observability of those processes themselves. So you get to see and create alerting if they fail, things like that go along all within the Snowflake interface. So it was very, very cool sort of to see it all integrated, and sort of show that they're trying to get the data into Snowflake. You can do all of your AI related compute in Snowflake. Either directly with them or with their Snowpark containers, and just serve it straight out of there.
Do Snowpark containers also consume the same credits though? All of this would be driving credit consumption on Snowflake, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Makes sense. And so in the demo, somebody was able to, this is just using SQL, right? Just using like the Snowsite UI, you could go in and just using SQL commands, you could get this LLM running and interpreting data that you've got in your Snowflake environment and get some sort of an application working all from SQL with nothing else?
They had it's a sort of a separate part of the UI where you would go in and you would identify like, oh, this is the data that I want you to be looking at, and these are the tokens and stuff that I want you to be able to do. And of course, yes, it was a random person who did this on data sets that were already pre-trained and or pre-identified and selected for the demo purpose. But yeah, it was very quick through, not very long in the UI. They were able to create this thing, run it, and then ask it questions, and we get results back live.
It's pretty crazy. So the curation of the data, which I imagine is going to be the messy part for most enterprises, that sort of messy step was already done. But once that's in place, the actual getting something running on top of that is something that you think anybody who's SQL proficient would be able to do. Yeah,
it looked quite easy. Again, as long as you've got the good data set already existing.
Yeah. No big deal, right? Just have a nice clean data set that's high quality and ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's super cool. And I think NVIDIA, I think Jensen Huang was at the summit, and there's a pretty big NVIDIA announcement as well.
Yeah, he dialed in from Taiwan, but okay. Yes, it was an interesting announcement, largely because they're already so integrated with NVIDIA to begin with. Like they were already using NVIDIA compute underlying pretty much all the technology to begin with. But yeah, the announcement was the addition of the NeMo retrieval framework from NVIDIA. But they're like, oh yeah, we're already running NVIDIA compute, and you can use a bunch of NVIDIA models already in Cortex. So it was the addition of the NeMo retrieval services on top of everything else that they have already.
Can you explain more about Nemo for anybody, including myself, who's not familiar?
Basically, they are the Nemo services. The idea is that they make it easier to do the generation of the data set generation for your LLM training. So to be able to help point at your unstructured text, to be able to more easily build something accurately that you can then point at and build your chatbot, build your RAG, build whatever you're actually building it on. It's supposed to be able to help you connect to different data, diverse types, and still be able to get something good out of it with less effort on your own part.
I see. So if I have, like, let's say I've got thousands and thousands of PDFs, each PDF may be 1 to several hundreds of pages or something like that. Nemo would help me extract, like, get the data in a format where I can use an LLM and get the data out of those documents, even if it's not already in sort of an extracted form.
Right, exactly. Yeah, helps with the tokenization of the documents to be able to find the right information.
The right way to slice them up and then get embeddings out of
Yep.
them. That's very cool. Okay. Yeah, I had heard that is sort of the modern equivalent of, like, a lot of heavy data engineering lift is how do we get all this stuff out of these formats and get embeddings from them that are performant and work pretty well for the model. So if it actually automates that, and then that functionality is again available directly within Snowflake, is that part of the Cortex set of features as well?
Yeah, I believe so. Most of their advanced modeling was coming through Cortex.
Cool. Okay. So if you're going to go in and use this set of features in Cortex, the Nemo retrievers from NVIDIA would be one way that you can leverage Cortex and go get data out of unstructured documents.
Right.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Next up, this is kind of circling back to, we were talking about catalog and governance, and I think this is where that kind of comes home, Horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely a set of tooling around labeling and lineage and privacy and secure, role-based access control. That's what RBAC stands for, and that sort of thing. So there a lot of tooling available, and available also through the Polaris catalog on the Iceberg data as well, to be able to see, sort of observe the data, label some things, tag things as private or not, or whatever other important tagging you have for your industry. The ability to do it in an automated fashion was one of the announcements that they made at the keynote as well, and on a schedule, on a schedule as well. And then also the ability to use that with Snowflake lineage to, like, okay, great, I've tagged this data as PII. I see that this other table has been created. We will automatically copy that label down, and drive that all the way through. A lot of various different options that they already had as well. I believe in sort of the Horizon space, this was I think 4 or 5 different product announcements. It was quite a product heavy keynote during the product keynote.
I think that's the favorite for a lot of folks. Horizon in general was not new at the summit, though. Horizon's been around for what, a year or maybe even 2 at this point. I forget.
Correct. Yeah, it's been around for a while, and it was just like, oh, we're making additions on on all 5 of these options. There were different additions that were being announced. Interoperability largely with the Polaris, but also different options in each of the other locations as well. I also went to a couple things on just sort of the alerting capabilities off of this, the ability to integrate with various different Jira or email or Slack or whatever, and be able to alert their violations through SQL SQL definitions of everything, which was interesting. Yeah.
So you can get, I think I did watch a demo video for this, especially the tagging section. You can go in and you can use, like, regexes and other ways of creating tagging, and then you go tag all the elements. The tags get persisted in another table in Snowflake, and then off of the results in that table, you can then enforce stuff based on the tags that you've created. And they do some, there's like you mentioned auto tagging. I forget exactly how that worked in the demo. Do they do they do some sort of smart identification of basic tag types, like they'll identify SSNs and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly. It looked like based on field names and a little bit off of regexes as well as allowing you to define your own custom ones on top of that.
And then I think I saw like tags can be hierarchical. Like it looks like it's pretty comprehensive, at least for doing governance inside the data that you've got Snowflake running on, and through Polaris by extension, anything that you've got in Iceberg as well.
Correct. Yeah, it is limited to what is accessible through Snowflake through their Polaris and their internal catalogs.
Do you know Snowflake can be used with external tables as well, right? Do you know if it also works for that? Can you effectively use Snowflake as a governance system even for data that's sitting outside of Snowflake other than Polaris?
That's a good question. I don't believe you'd be able to control any access of it because it's outside of Snowflake. But I think you should be able to still provide the tagging. And if it is still inside Snowflake, you should be able to, and you're using Snowflake for access to it, you should be able to still pull in lineage for compute and stuff and have those tags propagate.
You could, right, because the propagation happens inside of Horizon. You're not dependent on something outside. But if you wanted to do access control policies or something like that, you'd need to have that. The user would need to be accessing the data through Snowflake compute in order for you to be able to control it.
Right, that's correct.
Cool. But for Snowflake heavy shops, I mean, this is pretty heavy stuff. Like governance is a big topic, and it can get expensive to do governance with external tools. And this is usually like a big enterprise kind of challenge, which means prices go up even more. So it's pretty interesting that they're going super vertical by building this stuff into the data management capabilities right inside Snowflake. Did they announce anything around like observability and quality as well? I know that was a topic last year.
There was some announcement. I unfortunately couldn't make it to that session, which was I was disappointed with. It was quite full, but yes, there were some additional announcements for that as well.
Okay, but do you know? I don't see that listed as one of the five items here. Is that separate from Horizon? Is that just its own set of features?
I'm not sure if it's part of Horizon or not. I do know it didn't make it as high as one of these pillars.
I see. Okay. All right. Cool. Eric, any other closing thoughts on Snowflake before we hop into the Databricks part of the talk?
It was interesting to see sort of all the talks and just all of their emphasis on the partnerships and ability to do what you would like with the data accessed by the Snowflake ecosystem. So very much really focused on
trying to dispel this idea of vendor lock-in, it sounded like.
Yeah, exactly.
And between,
at the same time, arguing they have the tool set. If you get it in, you'll like Snowflake.
Right. It's open, but if you put it all in here, then it's really nice to work with using our stuff. All right, and switching gears, Databricks. Now, unfortunately, I was not able to make it to Databricks because I got sick after Snowflake, as a few people did. But Zach, you were there also with some more folks from the Bigeye team. How was Databricks?
Databricks conference was great. I think theming wise, or at least what I would interpret beyond their theme is what I heard. It was very similar to what Eric was referencing here of we're open, but we've got the best stuff. So take your data from wherever it is, and we've got the best car. Come try the features that we have, and that was a big focus. But the overall theme of the conference was data intelligence, which they broke down to a focus of the Lakehouse combined with now bringing to fruition their investment, their acquisition of Mosaic AI, and basically data democratization has been there. They've been pushing along with that. Now AI democratization within the organization was really this focus of data intelligence, that we need to bridge the gap on both, make it accessible to anybody who wants to in the company, and they provided a lot of updates around tooling that will allow for that.
All right. Well, why don't we roll into the first sort of major announcement that you had some thoughts on?
Yeah. So first, big announcement, and definitely went over as one of the biggest announcements there, Unity catalog going open source. So, similar to Snowflake announcing they're going to have a data catalog that's going to go open source in 90 days. I felt like Databricks really came out with sort of a mic drop moment with this, and had Mate come out and open source the GitHub repo during the keynote. He did it right then. They had a big question. When is this coming? 90 days, 89 days since it was announced yesterday. He did it right then, opened up the repo there. So that was very much a shot over the bow, I feel, a little bit at what was announced the week previous. But really, similar sort of messaging there of, no more fragmented governance, really breaking down this idea of data silos there to let the best engine win. So, come through and, get outside of that idea of vendor lock-in, that this is open source, you can embrace it, and even if you decided to move elsewhere, it's going to be an open source project that you can start to leverage beyond just what the Databricks offering is. It's compatible with Hive Metastore, it's compatible with the Iceberg REST catalog API as well, so out of the box, sort of natively supporting everything that you need to. And their big push with Unity Catalog is it being multimodal. So beyond just your data that's there, also your ML models, your AI that you're using in the organization, all governed under one catalog that is now moving open source, is going to be building even greater towards the future.
So direct parallel to Polaris, but available on stage live. I like that. That's pretty aggro.
Yeah. They got the benefit of going the week after to be able to prepare that moment and then be able to set it up right then.
And I think we've talked a bit about some of the features around Horizon for doing governance, where at Snowflake they've split the notion of the catalog in terms of the compute engine interfacing with the storage, which is the Polaris piece, and then the governance aspects are inside of Horizon. Whereas with Databricks, they're both use Unity for both for the how do I connect my compute engines to my storage, and also the sort of governance functionalities also in Unity. Is that right?
Yeah, the governance functionality definitely rolled under the umbrella of Unity. And from my perspective, I think it's Unity catalog has been around a little bit longer. I think they're showing a little bit more maturity in that catalog by encompassing more of the all-in-one that you'd expect, and probably some competitive aspects to other paid catalogs that are out there and things along those lines. But I think they're a little bit further down that road than Polaris is at this point when they release it.
Right. Well, Unity is both a little bit older, and Databricks has kind of always had a little bit, it seems like, at least from the outside, I don't have any inside baseball here, but it seems, at least from where we stand, like Snowflake's been a bit heavier on partner relations, and Databricks been a little bit more biased on we're going to build vertically and make sure the platform has everything. Not that they don't have a healthy partners ecosystem, they certainly do, but it seems like there's just a little bit more bias there from the Databricks side, from what I can see.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. With the theme of data intelligence, our friends at Elation, that's definitely their go-to-market and strategy that they've had as well. So they're aligning on that end.
They're just using the same phrase.
Yeah.
All right. And then you already mentioned this, but the Tabular acquisition, this was actually announced, I think, during Snowflake Week, right?
Yes. So this was announced a week before, sort of brought formally up at the keynote in this announcement. They're onboarding the team responsible for creating Iceberg and basically going forward with Uniform now and bringing Uniform to GA and saying, you should own your data. This should not be a question of whether you can use a given data platform if you have your data in hand. So it's about getting that interoperability there and letting the best engine, the best platform win at the end of the day and moving towards that. So bridge that gap between format compatibility. And they really bang the drum on the idea of organizations need to own their own data and not be vendor locked into where their data resides and what format it's in.
And if you're a Databricks shop, you can just convert everything that you've been using in Delta Lake historically into uniform tables, and then it's potentially portable. Yeah. And that sounds like they're taking a shot at anybody who's got data that's actually in Snowflake, not in Iceberg with Polaris on it, but in Snowflake.
I think that's a reasonable way to put it. And it's the idea of we'll give you the same compatibility of the engines that you're working with now. Just bring it across.
And so if you're a existing user of Iceberg and you now know that the folks from Iceberg are now on the core team at Databricks working on, I assume they're going to be working on Uniform and stuff like that. It looks like the goal here is to zip up Delta Lake and Iceberg kind of into one one thing, no more distinction anymore. Just get it all into that format and then use it however you want.
Yeah, that's what they spoke towards, the eventual convergence, and that in a couple of years this won't even be a conversation. Hopefully it's a thought in the past that there was any compatibility issues here, and we're moving forwards with more advancements in important features rather than a battle over format.
And that I think that speaks to a bigger trend. I know we've spoken with a bunch of different enterprises, and there's a lot of questions about like, which cloud infrastructure should we be using? Should we be on multiple? Should we be split between, let's say, some infrastructure GCP, some in AWS? That way we're not locked into an infrastructure vendor. This is kind of taking that to the next level and saying like for your data, you should also be able to go and put your storage wherever you want, and whether that's Iceberg inside of S3 buckets or that's Iceberg on GCS or something like that. You should be able to, that should be totally portable, and you should really just be looking at at compute providers at that point.
Yeah, they framed it in the keynote as USB stick. You should be able to bring it to any machine these days that can be compatible with it. So,
does this also benefit Starburst then in a way?
That's an interesting question. I'd have to think about that one and think. Well, what are your thoughts in bringing that up around it benefiting Starburst?
Well, I'm just thinking about like if you want to go and run Trino on top of data, and I mean, does this raise all boats, so to speak, for your Dremios and your Starbursts and anybody who's essentially offering an interface on top of the data that might be in some storage somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that's a completely reasonable way to think about it. That it is going to be overall beneficial for everyone, and kind of it's leveling the playing field and seeing where these organizations can go after it.
Super interesting. Did they announce what's going to happen with Tabular itself? Or are they going to sunset like the company and the product?
They did not make any announcements in regards to that I was aware of. It seemed to be full on embracing of the Tabular team coming in, and as opposed to the idea of like, oh, it'd be the Tabular team coming in and we're going to kind of take down Iceberg. It's more of how do we bolster both and combine forces.
And I think the history here is that they were trying to gain adoption, they being Databricks, were trying to push adoption of Delta Lake. Iceberg just got picked up by the community quite well. I don't know if it was a 50-50 split in terms of adoption, but Iceberg was definitely like holding its own as a format, and was getting quite large. So this potentially prevents a major sort of split in the storage ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think what you probably had, again, we talk about the open sourcing of all these things, and there was probably concerns about vendor lock, and even with Delta Lake being open source, because the majority of contributors were from Databricks themselves, as opposed to Iceberg starting out as kind of truly open source there, and then Tabular coming in later.
Right. What was it? Netflix? Iceberg's out of Netflix. So Netflix obviously was not monetizing Iceberg directly in any way versus Databricks pretty clearly, whether it's open source or not, it's still primarily attached to a company that controls its outcome.
Absolutely.
All right. And then, of course, Data and AI Summit wouldn't be Data and AI Summit without some AI announcements as well.
Yeah, so Mosaic AI did some really interesting presentations around it. The keynote, basically, kind of bolstering the talk track of Databricks that they're making good on the acquisitions and investments they made and announced in the previous year. Mosaic, they brought in a number of features, very interesting agent framework that they put into public preview that really provides easy assistance in building, what you would expect of RAG applications, augmenting with your proprietary data, building out compound AI workflows. So really going through and leveraging each kind of foundation model, for what it's best for, and going through and using, different snippets of that, building agents that would go and make your SQL call to get the specific data you want to bring in for reference for that. And then, even down to model training, so fine-tuning those foundation models as well. Just a lot of different pieces to a toolkit to kind of, I could very much see saying there it was, now is the time to ramp up and start leveraging this. They're making it easier and easier for you. The walls are breaking down as far as how complicated it is to leverage these models and actually get them out into production. They referenced at the start of the keynote presentation about 85% of these AI projects are not moving into production yet. There's a kind of a big gated hold up to that, and they definitely showed bridging some gaps there. They showed example of Shutterstock has built a new image AI, so a new image model built entirely on Shutterstock image collection, and that was all done through this Mosaic platform and is now available to Databricks customers. I thought that was a really interesting proposition there, that now they're opening up access to a model that is not using its licensed material. You're not going to find copyright issues and things with what it's generating in there, all built on top of Mosaic AI. So yeah, I think the additional part to Mosaic was governance around AI. So being able to manage and govern your models, rate limit them, see who's accessing them, see what costs are being run up by them, all sorts of different aspects of, not only can you jump in and embrace this, but then you're going to be able to see who's doing what with it and making sure it's not breaking any internal rules, making sure it's not ramping up costs unnecessarily, things along those lines as well.
And is the sort of observability and governance elements of the models that you build with Mosaic, is that part of Mosaic, or is that part of Unity, or how does that break down?
They all fall under the umbrella of data intelligence, and they all, as proposed at least, is that they interoperate together. So yes, Mosaic AI Gateway and their tools, tying into Unity as an overarching sort of governance layer there.
Okay, so you might do monitoring on like how many calls are being made against a model. That the collection of that information might come from Mosaic, but you're going to interface with it through Unity.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. And this, as you were describing this, it kind of made me think about there. Like a few years ago, there was a lot of I don't want to say hype necessarily, but around data marketplaces and this idea that private enterprises are going to publish data sets and other enterprises will be able to go into a marketplace and buy those data sets. And, this obviously exists to some degree. I know Snowflake Data Marketplace is pretty well known at this point, for example. I don't know that it ever really blew up maybe the way it sounded like it was going to, or the way some people envisioned. I'm sure they get plenty of use, but this feels like another cycle on that idea, like the example you gave with Shutterstock, where it's like, okay, cool. Instead of I as a business can go and generate returns based on things that I build for my own customers with our data, but then you can also go and build things that don't necessarily expose the data itself, but produce some benefit from your proprietary data that can be paid for by other enterprises. Like in the Shutterstock example, this is a model that generates images.
Yes.
All right. Okay, cool. Super interesting.
Yeah, and they did a live demo with it, as obviously they did some of those at Snowflake as well. It was very interesting to see in keynotes that large going for the live demo end of it. But they did a live demo of using Mosaic to bring some contextual clues from the data of a cookie selling company and generate basically an advertisement about their most popular cookie they were selling that month at a given location. And the kind of compounding calls that they did, it broke it down using Mosaic. They got it to a very nicely generated image, a call out to the actual cookie that was selling in their San Francisco location at that time. And then they ran it without kind of the compound flow from Mosaic and just had kind of general image generation, and it hallucinated, it made up a cookie name that doesn't exist. So they did show the power of it live there on stage as well.
Kind of like an A/B test, so you can see how much it enhances it. That's really cool. Cool. They didn't use a random audience member for that, though.
No random audience member there. That was a Databricks employee going through the demo for it, but it demoed very nicely.
If one were to take a cynical marketer's view, you might ask whether or not the random audience member at Snowflake was actually a random audience member.
It's the magician's plant, maybe.
Yes.
Maybe.
Classic trick. All right. AI and BI, what announcements do we have here?
Yeah, so AI BI is actually the name of a new announced part of the Databricks platform. They took kind of a show of hands or a call out to whether they like that name. I forget what the other name of it was that they were referencing, but it split the room about 50-50 as maybe expected. Cool feature set though, low code data visualizations with AI agents to go through and build out visualizations directly within the Databricks UI, and then Genie that they announced with it was also very interesting, of being able to natural language query that data and have it gain context and learn from that. So there were some interesting demos around going, they want to show a visualization of churn in the month of May or something along those lines. And it actually came back, rather than hallucinate something, it said, I don't know what churn is. You're going to need to define this for me. And then going on. And so they did that. were successful with it. Then later on, in going to make a new visualization and asking about churn as well, had that context still there as to far as how churn is defined, and went through this calculation. So it was pretty interesting, and it's interesting to see how it will fine tune itself based on your organization and the users that utilize it over time.
The AI analyst has to be told what the definition of churn is before they can go and produce analytics about churn. It almost sounds like a real life analyst.
It very much was seemingly that experience. It was very interesting. I think the only thing there is, what if who asked it doesn't really know how to define churn, and how long does it remember that for, and how do you stop it from using that as context in the future? I'm sure they have answers to that, but that wasn't shown at the time.
As a former analyst, this all sounds very familiar. Yeah. The person defining churn may not know what churn is. They just know that they want to report on it.
Yeah, or just the fact that you have multiple users in there, and I definitely, I'm sure Kyle, you've seen it, and churn has its own definitions for different groups, depending on how they calculate it. So that is something over time to see what they do to be, like the governance, the source of truth of what churn is in an organization. How do you lay that out and make sure that when you get those sort of certified answers out of it, that they are operating off a common definition for those items?
This makes me think about Transform, which DBT bought. I want to say, was it last year or the year before? But I don't think we haven't seen sort of semantic modeling stuff come out of Databricks or Snowflake in the same way that we've seen these other governance features yet. But I imagine that if this is going to become a bottleneck, then they'd want to invest in this at some point in the future.
Yeah, and Databricks did have some announcements around, and I don't have enough context around it here, but they did announce metrics. So with DBT and Cube and some other things coming in, there was some aspect of bringing that semantic layer from outside in these tools where you're already having it, building it into these flows. So that probably is somewhat of the answer of how this will work.
Well, I am reminded of the flashlight apps on iOS back in the day. There used to be companies that would make flashlight apps, and then at some point Apple just decided that they didn't need to partner with somebody for those apps anymore. So this feels a little bit familiar to me.
Yeah.
All right, some cool stuff on, we were just speaking about data modeling and data engineering. That's what the next one is, yeah?
Yeah, so Lakeflow, definitely interesting to see, basically a GUI interface brought in to bring, creation of data pipelines native to Databricks, the data intelligence platform, all of that. Lakeflow Connect was really the big focus of this. So about a year ago, they acquired Archeon. They're going through and leveraging that now for point-and-click CDC from all sorts of sources, ones you'd expect, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, those things, but also applications, Salesforce, Workday, things along those lines. So, the ELT, ETL focus, that extract and load portion, they're really handling here native into Databricks now, and allowing you to really easily ingest that data. And then showed some features that are upcoming of, a point-and-click transformation interface that also has this Genie AI overlay over the top of it as well, where that'll go through and suggest, primary keys that you would merge on, and basically go through and suggest transformations. And then after it suggests transformations, suggest a potential dashboard that you want to build on top of it as well. So really showing how this will anticipate and get you much faster to intended results of a data pipeline to the end goal, to the the dashboard or whatever data product you're looking to build, with some AI base behind it. They also referenced that they're bringing an orchestration layer to it as well, so you're going to manage these jobs, through the Databricks interface and be able to orchestrate them.
Is the current feature set that they're announcing here? This is just defining the jobs themselves today. Currently, you still needed to use some external to do it.
So this came out. I believe they announced the Connect being in private preview now, like early stage preview of the CDC connectors and that, and then the transformational layer to it, and then on from there to the job orchestration is in the coming soon category. Didn't lay out a timeline for that yet, but did show some of those features sort of live in action.
Very interesting. And the transformation jobs, I you can write these in SQL or in Spark or whatever language you want, or
it looked that you could write them in any language that you want. This was going through and actually just taking some drag and drop, and it was writing the SQL out for it, finding the primary keys, merging the two data sets together on it and being able to filter from there. But yeah, it looks like you should be able to use any of the languages that work through Photon or anything like that on Databricks.
I probably should have said framework. The keen folks will probably point out that Spark isn't a language directly, but got it. Understood. Cool. All right. Lot of good drops from both companies. I think even more than last year or prior years. This one really felt like they were going directly toe to toe in announcements. They were kind of one-upping each other, dropping a news announcement during the other guy's conference. We're going to open source this later. We're going to open source it right now. Like it's feeling very Godzilla King Kong in here, at least from where I sit. So I have a couple wrap-up questions for you guys. There are three. First one is from the conference that you went to. What was your sort of mega overarching takeaway? Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of the same as what I said in the summary. It's going to, you know, Snowflake is definitely like focused on let's have access to the data, and we can provide all of these tools, all of these partners, all of these integrations, and we will be able to provide, particularly in the ML/AI space, the best tooling at, you know, in a single vertical, single cost center, single governance layer. We can, you know, we think we'll be able to provide the best tooling on that to produce all of your I think the keynote statement is the era of enterprise AI, and all the tools to support that.
Yeah, from the Databricks side, my takeaway is very much the same, and it shows how much this was very head to head. It was very much similar messaging coming through. Of we have the best platform, we have the best engine. You know, bring your data over, keep your data yourself. We don't want to own it. We just want to show you that, you know, our car's faster, our car, you know, has better, you know, comfort features, all those things to it is kind of what they were pushing. And at the end of the day, you're going to be more successful, you know, with X platform versus Y.
I have a question about that. Was it when you mentioned like our engine is better, our engine's faster, et cetera, was there very much direct benchmarking or performance discussion in terms of like speed of compute and things like that? Or was it more about like the sort of ecosystem around it, the governance piece, the lineage piece, the, you know, interoperability piece? Like how much emphasis was it on sort of the, to use your car analogy, Zach, on like automatic windows and air conditioning, or how much of it was just raw horsepower?
From the Databricks side, at least, they did have some benchmarks, especially in their keynote, you know, showing divergence from Snowflake as the queries got larger and data sets got larger. They were showing how they have better performance over that, and also how they have improved their performance over the years in comparison to, you know, unnamed data warehouse in a Snowflake blue listed on the slide, but showing that while Snowflake themselves have improved as well, Databricks has been getting better and better, faster and faster, and being able to, you know, as they put it much more readily, be able to provide very curated, tailored experiences to customers because they're getting so close to real time for everything that they can provide you.
Okay. Eric, was there much discussion on, like, again, raw sort of benchmark based performance at Snowflake?
The main thing that I remember is they mainly did that with their particular ML models, particularly around the LLMs for aided SQL and those sort of things. I don't think there was anything directly on query performance, but it was on the amount of time required for training and of models, where they were demonstrating their own to be better than a lot of the competition.
Got it. Okay,
so really more on the AI side.
Yeah, some performance, but model performance, not query performance so much.
Right.
Cool. All right. So second question, advice that you would give to organizations looking to leverage any of the new tools or features that got announced at the conference. Yeah, same question, Eric. What would you tell folks if they were interested in some of the stuff that we just talked about?
I mean, they've got a decent number of the things, you know, all of these things are demoable. You can see them online. It's if you've got the data in Snowflake, it looks very easy to go ahead and just attach and play with it for a little bit. I don't know that I have any specific advice around the tools themselves, but yeah, definitely easy enough to integrate, to attach to a data set, go through a couple of examples to, you know, build a chatbot or whatever, see what comes out.
So if a company wanted to give somebody a couple weeks and just say, hey, go go download these, go play with them, go investigate them, and you can pretty easily go and do a little bit of prototyping and exploration and kind of come back with a summary of like what might be applicable for your team.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And Zach?
Yeah, from my end, I'll steal.
Adriana is our show manager. Do you mind? Yeah, thank you. Okay.
From my end, I'll steal it from Jensen Huang, who was at the Databricks keynote. His call to action was get started. That this is growing exponentially. This is a bullet train, not something that you're going to be able to catch up with. Get started now, and they are making these tools available to you to get started now and be able to really work towards getting chatbots, image generation, whatever you want to do with this, into production now, as opposed to being in sort of an everlasting planning stage of we have to address AI at some point, we have to use it at some point. They very much showed on the Databricks side, and it sounds like on the Snowflake side, the tooling is there for you to go in and start experimenting and really put something to use.
Okay, so advice from you would be somewhat similar to Eric, like just go get in there, get hands-on with it,
very much the same. With the ease of use that they showed for this, and the models that are prepackaged there to be able to experiment with, and all these things, and really the idea of like RAGs not having to have vector databases involved in new technology from that end that you may not be familiar with. You can start to leverage all these things out of existing tooling that they're rolling out now.
Very cool. All right, third and final question. Number one trend that technology or data leaders should be watching. Obviously, this isn't specific to the conference, but I think we are seeing some kind of macro shifts going on right now, and each company is telegraphing a little bit where they're headed, at least over the next couple of years. Eric, what do you think folks should be paying attention to most in terms of like macro trends or bigger themes?
It definitely feels like AI is the way everyone is trending. Having the ability to have these tools exposed to users, to support staff, that sort of thing, like it's going to be a requirement. And definitely like getting in on that, making sure that you've got the data there, the ability to generate these ready to go. We are very much accelerating in this direction right now.
It definitely seems like it. Zach, anything different besides that?
Yeah, so from my end, I think the most interesting thing that I'd say to go out and pay attention to, I saw a presentation at Databricks on small language models, which is definitely going outside of the norm of we're pursuing AGI. We've got all these frontier models that we're going after. They were very much banging the drum on small language models that are very task specific are going to be sort of the next iteration that we move towards. And you're going to see some very interesting things coming out of research groups, coming out of different companies, things along those lines. And I think, seeing at the conference them talking about how easy they're making it to fine tune, the foundational models, you're probably going to see the same thing coming from other companies where they're developing these smaller models that are very task specific, and then you build them into these compound AI flows.
Almost like DAGs of models.
Yeah.
Very interesting. If I can add one here, I think a lot of what we were just talking about and a lot of what we saw from last year, we saw some announcements about sort of more embedded features in these platforms. This year, we saw even more announcements about things like governance, we're open sourcing this, we're open sourcing that, et cetera. If I could add one here, I think the trend, if I'm putting myself in the seat of like a CDO, CIO, et cetera, that I would be thinking about is how much consolidation and verticalization is coming, especially from these infrastructure players. And how is that going to affect the way that your organization is, again, I know that they're talking a lot about preventing vendor lock-in. I think that seems to me like that's a reaction to a major concern that a lot of people have. And it's almost like with the one hand, they're saying, look, we're not locking you in because the stuff is open source, it's portable, bring your own compute, et cetera. On the other hand, they're dangling a lot of features about how to govern and how to manage and how to do observability and how to do performance tuning and that kind of thing. So I think if I were going to suggest a trend here to data leaders to pay attention to, it's the fact that there are a lot of different data companies that got launched and funded over the last 5 years or so. And we are now entering the phase where I think we're seeing the market consolidate. We're starting to see these big players make acquisitions, build things internally, make them free parts of their platforms. And with that comes sort of that risk, that sort of getting too centralized on one vendor. There's definitely benefits to it, but I would be very clear about what the trade-offs are about getting too deep down the road with one vendor who's going super vertical. So that'd be my addition. All right, I think that brings us to the end. If you enjoyed this talk and you want to learn more about Bigeye, you can request a demo using this QR code here. If you want to chat with me or Eric or Zach, all of our emails are listed down there below. We'd love to chat with you. I'd love to hear your comments or your opinions about these big announcements, where these companies are going. Feel free to drop me a note or either the two of them. Eric and Zach, thanks for joining me on the webinar today. Appreciate having you both here.
Thanks.
Thanks, Cal.
All right, and thank you all for watching.